Um, the tower, unlike the other tower, didn't just have hand-operated gates, it had electric gates. And in fact, you could see down the track in both directions, about 2 miles, and there were 7 crossings in those 2 miles, and you put down the gates individually on those 7 crossings. I always had binoculars with me. I don't know if the other men that worked there did or not, but I don't know how else you could do it. We didn't have CCTV monitors, so if you wanted to make sure when you were putting the gates down that there wasn't a truck on the tracks or something that was going to tear the gates off, then you had to kind of look with the binoculars. And I had a couple of switches that I had to throw occasionally to route trains onto a siding. That didn't happen very often, but occasionally it did, and you had to know how to do it. These were also electrically operated switches. I worked at Tower in Hammond on Calumet Avenue, mostly nights for some reason. My shift would start at 8 in the evening, and things were pretty quiet. There wasn't a whole lot of traffic, except of course when the shifts left off from the steel mills. The steel mills were in Gary, Indiana, and the people lived in Hammond and Calumet City that worked there would drive through down Calumet Avenue, and the gate, the crossing I was working at, or the crossings, were on a freight yard, so they crossed many different tracks. I'm not absolutely sure at that point how many tracks there were there. Probably at least 6, maybe 7 or 8 pairs of rails as the tracks. And the trains would, the locomotives, the switchers would push 6 or 10 or 12 or 20 or 30 cars down in one direction. Then they'd pick up some cars there, pull them out, switch over to a different track, move down there and pick up some cars from there. That's how they assembled the trains. But it also meant, of course, that the gates were down oftentimes for extended periods. And you can probably already get the picture that steel workers coming home at midnight were not at all pleased when the gates were down for an hour and a half. So I'd sit up in my tower, and I guess it goes without saying that I had no control over the trains. If a train came, I had to put the gates down. I had no choice. I mean, the train would be on the tracks. Sometimes the train would sit on the tracks without moving for some period of time, up to a half an hour perhaps. To say that this made these tired, sweaty, thirsty steel workers somewhat upset is not doing the situation justice. So one of the pieces of equipment that I was told about when I started the first time at this tower was an iron bar about this long. It was shaped a little bit like a club, actually. It was quite heavy on one end and a little lighter on the other end. You could swing it quite well. The tower had a stairway going up to it. The last part to go into the tower, however, came in from underneath. So you opened a trap door to get in. And even if you stood on this trapdoor, an angry steel worker had enough strength to push you over. I felt very sad about it because I'm not an aggressive person and I didn't feel comfortable about threatening anyone. But I had no choice. They would have bodily harmed me for sure if I hadn't threatened them with the steel bar. Nothing ever happened, that is, no one ever really attacked me, but a number of them did come up the stairs there, blaming me, of course, for the fact that the gates were down. I even told one, I'll put up the gates, but I can't move that train that's in your way there. So those night shifts at that tower were sometimes quite exciting. They were fun though. I enjoyed it very much. It was somehow romantic sitting in a tower in the dark. I had a big control board in front of me with lights on it where I could see where the trains were. It was quite modern for the time, actually. And I thought it was all very exciting and interesting. I enjoyed working for the railroad. I've often said that crossing guard job was the best job I ever had in my life. When I think back to some of the situations in my career as a scientist, it's true. That job was pretty good. Excuse me. Good coffee. I think I showed a bag of it one time. I bought a 60-pound bag of Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee. That's what this is, pure single blend, a single variety. And my good cookies here. School was not, I hated school. I hated high school. Grade school was alright. I hated high school. The kids were mean. There were a lot of really mean kids in my school. I got the shit beat out of me a number of times. I was nowadays you'd say a nerd. I was interested in building radio transmitters. I had my amateur radio's license when I was 11, I think 11 or 13, no I guess 13. I started when I was 11, I got my license at 13. And I built my own 75 watt code transmitter. And I'll show some pictures of that actually. Later I had a much bigger station. I became disenchanted with that hobby too. The reason, I'll explain it sometime, maybe I'll explain it later. In any case, kids didn't like me because I was not interested in the things they were interested in. I dislike team sports very much, and I still do actually, because I have a very great dislike for the concept of them and us. And that is, of course, the foundation of team sports. It's them against us, and I don't like the idea that children get that instilled in them when they're very young already with the idea of sports. So that made me more unpopular. I have a story I'll tell about baseball sometime. but that's for a different time. I was quite passive. I tried not to I tried not to get in trouble, but I often did, somehow, just by being there. I remember walking to meet a man who was going to drive me to an amateur radio meeting. Maybe I told this story at some time. In any case, I was just walking there to his house in the middle of the winter, and these three bullies from my school saw me, came in the opposite direction, pushed me off the curb, and then kicked me when I was down. I never really learned to defend myself. I suppose that's my problem.